Hi, my name is Mariah Spires, and I'm a graduate student at Morningside College. During this particular study, I was a fifth grade teacher. I taught reading and language arts. Now I will be teaching fourth grade for this upcoming school year, and I will teach all subjects. My research is titled Smart Goal Setting Impact on Fifth Grade Fluency. A problem that I saw regarding reading fluency and proficiency is that scores continue to be a matter of concern in the education system. While there are many achievement gaps that are closing, there continues to be a large number of students in the United States that are not proficient in reading. The lack of fluent reading will have a constant impact on students' understanding in multiple subject areas. Furthermore, the lack of fluency can really discourage a student's reading as well as their lack of enjoyment for reading. Evidence is shown through assessment data. My assessment was shown through FastBridge, CBMR fluency probes, but it is also shown through district assessments as well. As you can see on the screen, I have listed some statistics about students who are not proficient in reading and how detrimental it is for their future. On to my why. I am currently a fourth grade teacher. I have taught reading in grades 3 through 5 for 4 years. I have really seen the ramifications for low reading fluency and what it can mean for students. It can mean being pulled from certain likable subjects. What I mean by that is this past year, I had students that were pulled from specials, so music, library, PE, those desirable subjects, and it was really hard on the kids who had to be pulled. I consistently notice problems with my students' fluency. There is such a push nowadays for students to be fluent, and especially fluent by third grade. So being a fifth grade teacher, I saw how detrimental it was for my students that were so far from grade level. I also wanted to find a research-based strategy that would work for multiple grade levels. Since I have been bumped around so much, I wanted to find a strategy that would work no matter what grade I wound up in. And finally, I sought for a way to help my students love reading and take ownership of their own learning. I feel like oftentimes the push with assessments can be so overwhelming to students and teachers as well, and if we don't allow time for our students to own their own learning, they become discouraged very, very fast and also very disengaged. Same with us teachers. We know that different theoretical frameworks work for different studies, and it was very clear to me that Flavel and John Keller's theory fit my study the best. So according to Flavel's theory on metacognition, students should be thinking about their own thinking. So in other words, students need to be aware of their own learning, and Flavel believed that motivation was crucial for that. Additionally, John Keller's ARCS model discusses the importance of motivation on learning. And although it is still argued that motivation is important, I wanted to study the really important pieces to the metacognition and interventions on their academic success. Most of all, students need to be engaged daily and have that motivating factor, and so both theories take that aspect into consideration. Most past reading interventions have not focused solely on an individual student. The Minnesota Reading Corps is actually one that does happen to focus on one student, one-on-one students, and has been very successful. Most studies on interventions in schools nowadays do not focus solely on one student. They focus on mostly group, which we all know as teachers, it is due to time constraints. Any intervention that is done should address a deficit, whether that be fluency or whether that be comprehension. The intervention needs to be based upon that. Past research interventions have not been done independent of any sort of growth mindset or goal setting intervention. And so, like I said, most reading interventions are not solely based on one student at one time. So in goal setting is definitely not seen to be integrated at all, usually. The purpose of my study was to determine the impact of a growth setting and growth mindset intervention on fifth grade students' fluency scores. So my hypothesis was that students who set their own fluency SMART goals and who receive a growth mindset intervention weekly will grow more words per minute than their peers who do not set their own fluency goals. The variables, the independent being the growth setting and growth mindset interventions, the dependent variable being their benchmark test scores. Possible impact. So the results of my study can help teachers make instructional decisions about fluency. A lot of it has to do with, depending on where they lie on their benchmark, that can kind of cater what kind of intervention are you going to use. Are you going to use a whole group if all of them are very, very close? Or are you going to use something different, which is what happened in my case, where they're kind of all over the place? My work as a practitioner will be impacted whether or not I use the SMART goals as an intervention, because I have to select interventions every single time that we take these tests, which is 3 times a year. I have to be able to be flexible and change that up for the future. The methods was a simple A/B research design, so a pretest was given in the fall. That is just their fall fluency scores. Then the intervention followed by their post data, which was winter fluency scores, is what I happen to use. I had a control group and an experimental group. As you can see, I had 23 students in both classes. Males and females happened to actually be exactly the same. The only difference being one class had 5 students with IEPs, the other one had 6. Materials. So I use the following materials. The first 2 bullet points are books. Those I had gotten at a PLC conference, and as a school, we use those during our PLC meetings as well as our whole school meetings. We are really trying to use those SMART goals as well as a growth mindset as a school-wide, not just teacher to teacher. Also, the FAST CBMR comprehension probes, those are given from FastBridge, and they are different every week, but they are the same for every single student. On to the procedure. The procedure was using fall benchmark data, like I said, from FastBridge, and then the students participated in the intervention for 10 weeks, and then we had the winter benchmark testing. The intervention was based on growth mindset, so to begin with, 3 20-minute lessons per week during morning meeting were based on growth mindset, and the other 2 days during morning meeting, it was based off of goal setting. So to follow up with that, individual conferences with students weekly happened, as well as each student met with me one-on-one with their goal set binders, which had been tracking their progress. The reliability and validity is that the CBMR is recognized in my district as well as the state of Iowa to show fluency data. The results showed a dependent sample t-test was used for both the pre and post. Findings confirmed that both groups did not score statistically different on the fluency benchmark assessments. One group ended up scoring higher on both. That was just, solely based on the different groups of kids. So the hypothesis was that students who set their own fluency SMART goals and who receive that growth mindset intervention weekly will grow their words per minute more than the ones who do not set fluency goals. So what does this all mean? So findings did not support the hypothesis of what I thought. Individualized interventions can be really powerful and have a significant impact, but there was no significant correlation between setting SMART goals to improve fluency solely based on my study. So yes, scores were improved, but they were not statistically significant. The metacognition theory by Flavel must be understood in order to provide students with proper interventions. So, getting students to understand why fluency is so important, why they are engaging in this certain intervention, and what are they getting out of this, this corresponds perfectly with Flavel and Keller with getting students to be intrinsically motivated. And the motivation and the individualized goal setting was met by my study. Implications. So for students, this means being intrinsically motivated and having that one-on-one teacher time, which we all know as teachers does not happen near enough. Getting buy-in from the district is huge. So with such tight schedules, I know my school is set on such a tight schedule. It is almost minute to minute. And so with such time constraints, if we can prove that one-on-one time is so important and so crucial, they may be apt to lessen the tight schedules if we can prove that it helps our reading fluency. The limitations, so short amount of time, we all know that reading takes a lot of time, and time is never seems to be on our side as teachers. Transient students, at the school that I work at, we have a lot of students who leave, which ends up skewing my data. I had to take them out. I actually had, I want to say 10 students who I originally had data for in the beginning, but then by the time we gave the winter benchmark, those students were no longer able to be in the data because they moved. As well as students who came in the middle, that didn't necessarily affect my data as I didn't include them, as I didn't have their data from the fall. The length of study, I only did it for one technically semester. I could have done it for the whole year. Also, a lot of external things, kids being gone. I cannot help that. Kids being sick, vacations, things that are going on at home, all those various things that us as teachers don't have control over. Recommendations, so continued research to strengthen and validate the findings of my study. Longer, like I said, I could have done it for the whole year. Larger group, meaning I could have done the entire 5th grade, but I chose to only do my 2 sections of 5th grade, so I could have had a larger participant pool. Also, differentiating the type of goal-setting intervention, so we could have done something different, maybe not something during morning meeting, maybe something to start reading class. There's just various things that I could have changed. Here are my references, if you take a look at those. Otherwise, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Please give me feedback. I would love to hear your advice. Thank you.